Hey there! Before we dive into today's episode, just a quick reminder, if you're looking for tools, inspiration, or training to multiply disciples right where you are, head over to newgenerations.network. You'll also find a link in our show notes to join the community and connect with others on the same journey. And don't forget, you can listen to the Movement series and all our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome, my friend. You're listening to the Movement series, a journey through powerful books that shine light on how ordinary people in every corner of the world are sparking extraordinary movements of the gospel. In this season, we are walking chapter by chapter through Living Fire, a book by my friend Aichi B.R., a story of how God is fanning flames of faith across regions once thought unreachable. These aren't just stories. They're signs of a global movement fueled by obedience, sacrifice, and the Holy Spirit. So, wherever you are, whether you're in the city or the countryside, know this: God is moving and He is inviting you to be part of His story.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission is to take a dense stack of sources and pull out the critical insights you need to be well-informed and fast. Today we're continuing our journey into the Movement series, really looking at the foundations of these rapidly multiplying faith communities, often in some really challenging parts of the world. We are diving deep into Chapter 14, and this one is focused on a concept called obedience-based discipleship. All of our source material today comes from the author Aichi, who has spent, decades building these movements, and his take on what really drives them is pretty radical.
It is. It's really radical, and it pushes back against a lot of, traditional ways we measure success. The core idea from Aichi in this chapter is right up front. Yeah. He says that obedience isn't just a good spiritual practice. It's the essential, non-negotiable evidence that someone is a genuine disciple.
The essential evidence.
Yes. He calls it the core DNA that a movement needs to reproduce explosively.
So we're not just talking about having the right beliefs or, say, going to church regularly.
Not at all.
We're talking about a tangible, measurable, and an immediate commitment to action.
Yeah.
But why this? Why is obedience and not, say, deep Bible knowledge the thing that makes these disciple-making movements work?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And his answer is entirely practical. Our mission today is to unpack how this incredibly high standard of immediate obedience is really the engine for reproduction. It's not just about being holy. It's about speed and accountability. Aichi grounds this whole idea in the words of Jesus, specifically John 14.15. If you love me, keep my commands.
Simple as that.
It's so simple, but it creates this unbreakable link, right, between affection and action. If the love is real, the obedience just has to follow.
And that directly challenges how a lot of people measure their own faith. This idea that just believing the right things is enough.
Exactly.
But Aichi is saying that belief without action is, it's incomplete. And he applies this lens directly to the Great Commission in Matthew 28.
He does, and it's so critical. When Jesus gives that final command, go, make disciples, baptize them, the last piece of the instruction is the key.
Right.
He says, teach them to obey everything I have commanded. It's not teach them everything I have commanded. The focus is on the act of obeying.
So obedience is the result you're supposed to get. It proves the discipleship actually happens.
It validates the entire process, yes.
What's really fascinating here is how that standard, that focus on obedience, actually makes the whole thing grow faster.
How so?
Well, if a new disciple is taught something and they immediately go and do it, like they pray for a sick neighbor or share a story with a family member, they prove they're ready to lead much faster than if they just sat in a class for 6 months first.
That's the operational genius of it. And Aichi draws this really sharp line between that kind of immediate functional obedience and what he calls just, outward signs of religiosity.
Like what?
He says true love for God isn't shown by singing songs, wearing a cross, carrying a Bible, or speaking holy language. Those things, if they're disconnected from action, he sees them as meaningless. They're just placeholders. And more importantly, they don't reproduce.
So the focus is less on collecting religious knowledge and more on showing you've been transformed through just practical daily submission to the commands.
Precisely. It makes discipleship something you can do right now. And that's what a movement is. If you want to replicate quickly, you can't have disciples who are just stalling, endlessly studying but never applying. Obedience is the gatekeeper.
Let's unpack the historical side of this, because Aichi argues this isn't some new strategy. He says it's a principle that's rooted deep, deep in the Old Testament, right from the very beginning.
Right, from creation. The story of Adam and Eve is his ultimate case study. God gives them everything and just one single boundary, one rule.
Don't eat from that one tree.
Don't eat from that one tree. The command was so simple, which really highlights that obedience itself was the core issue in the garden, not how hard the instruction was. And disobedience to that one small command, well, it brought sin into the whole world.
And that pattern just continues, right? That obedience is the right response to grace. After God rescues Israel from Egypt, they are saved first.
Grace. Yes.
And then immediately they're called into a covenant where they show their loyalty through obedience.
The Pentateuch just hammers this point home again and again. You look at Deuteronomy 28 and it lays it all out. Blessing is linked to obedience and failure is linked to disobedience. It's this constant theme.
So it's not about earning salvation.
No, not at all. It's about showing you're grateful, showing you belong. It's the response to being rescued.
That it also has to come from the right place, from the heart. Which brings us to the story of King Saul.
A huge moment. Samuel's rebuke in 1 Samuel 15, to obey is better than sacrifice. That is such an important idea, especially for people in very traditional, ritual-heavy cultures. Aichi points out that God is looking for heartfelt, action-real obedience, not just, empty religious theater.
And that idea of the heart, of heartfelt delight that flows right into the Psalms. Aichi brings up Psalm 119 a lot, where the writer is he's joyful, he delights in God's command.
Yes, which totally reframes it. It shifts obedience from being this heavy, burdensome duty to being a source of pleasure and connection.
Which brings us right back to your first point.
It connects it all. If obeying is a delight, it's not something you put off. It's immediate. It's joyful. And that's what makes rapid multiplication possible.
Okay, so here's where the source material shifts from, let's say, challenging theology to extremely high-stakes reality. Aichi really leans into Jesus' focus on the cost of discipleship.
He does. He references passages like Luke 14, where Jesus tells the crowds to sit down and actually count the cost before following him.
The call is for immediate, radical, and costly obedience.
Just like the first disciples. They immediately left everything, their nets, their jobs to follow. There wasn't a 2-week notice. It was instant.
Aichi has this quote that summarizes the whole approach, and I find it, it's incredibly challenging. He says, "To receive Jesus Christ costs us nothing. To follow Jesus Christ costs us something, and to serve Jesus Christ costs us everything."
Yeah.
And he makes it clear this cost is not optional. He literally asks for a blank check on their lives.
A blank check.
Which raises a question for me. How do you manage the risk of burning people out? I mean, we're talking about losing family, being exiled. That sounds psychologically crushing.
It's a critical question, and Aichi doesn't downplay the consequences. He's talking about real believers who have been imprisoned, who have been exiled, who have lost their spouse, their children because of their faith.
So how is that sustainable?
Well, he says the sustainability depends on 2 things. First, the motivation, which has to be love, and second, practical wisdom.
Practical wisdom.
Yes, he brings in that vital counterbalance from Jesus, the instruction to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves.
Okay, so radical obedience has to be balanced with wisdom. What does that look like on the ground? He mentions avoiding artificial persecution. What is that?
It means not creating unnecessary trouble for yourself. Artificial persecution is often just carelessness. Loudly protesting against a local religious leader or provoking a fight through arrogance. It's about not inviting hostility that comes from bad tactics, rather than from the message itself.
Got it. So the commitment is absolute, but the execution has to be smart.
An incredibly delicate balance. Full commitment, but with maximum caution. The cost is still there, it's non-negotiable, but disciples are taught how to navigate it intelligently.
Yeah.
And we have to keep coming back to the driving force behind all this. It's not a military-style submission. The motivation for this level of obedience is love. It's a deep relationship. Aichi compares it to a marriage, where you naturally want to please your partner. The obedience flows from affection, not from fear.
Which brings us back around to that difference between just, head knowledge and a faith that actually functions. In James, it says, faith without deeds is useless.
Right.
So if a disciple knows the commands but doesn't act on them, Aichi is basically asking if that commitment is even real.
He uses a really sharp biblical contrast to make the point. He says that even the demons believe the truth about God, and they tremble because of it.
Wow.
They have perfect head knowledge, but they absolutely do not obey. And that difference knowledge versus functional obedience, that's the test. It's the criterion for spiritual life and maturity in these movements.
So obedience is a litmus test. If someone is struggling to obey, it isn't just a minor issue. It might be a sign that the foundation of the relationship itself is flawed.
Exactly. For Aichi, obedience is the proof of concept. It validates everything. It's not just about making a convert. It's about making a reproducing disciple. If someone won't obey, they can't model that life for the next person, and the movement just stops.
So if we boil it all down, the principle is stark. A real love-driven commitment to Christ results in radical, immediate, and costly obedience. And if that action is missing,
then according to Aichi, they might be a believer, but they aren't a functional, multiplying disciple.
this has been an incredibly focused and I think really challenging deep dives into the engine of these movements. We've seen that obedience-based discipleship, this push past just intellectual belief into real immediate action, is what fuels that explosive reproduction Aichi talks about.
It really is. It forces you to rethink how you measure success or even spiritual maturity. The challenge from Aichi isn't really about making you feel guilty. It's about strategy.
Right.
If obedience is the fastest path to making disciples who can make other disciples, then any group that wants to grow has to take that standard seriously. I think the question this whole study leaves you with is a practical one. If Aichi's movement defines commitment by immediate, costly obedience, what are the commands or principles that you, the listener, or maybe your own community currently treat as optional homework?
Optional homework versus immediate action.
That's the difference. That's where the movement gets its fuel.
How would applying Aichi's principle change the way your own community or organization measures what true commitment really is? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the movement series. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this chapter of the Movement series. As we've seen in Living Fire, the kingdom of God doesn't grow through comfort. It grows through courage. And the same Spirit who is moving in these stories is ready to move through you. If your heart is stirred, don't let it stop here. Visit newgenerations.network to get resources, tools, and training. Join the global community walking in this same fire. Link in the show notes. Until next time, keep the fire burning.
Thanks for listening to the Movement series. To find more episodes and explore tools that help you multiply disciples, visit newgenerations.network. And be sure to check the show notes or our bio for a link to join the community. We'd love to connect with you. Finally, subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. See you next time.